Hey everyone. Hey, thanks to all of you who went downtown to New Horizons last Thursday and served dinner. There were about 50 young men and women who got a hot meal because of you. Also, thanks to Deanna Crow along with the Minton Home Group for providing our community meal last Sunday. It was great just to spend time around the table with each other. So Charles Spurgeon was a brilliant 19th century preacher who has impacted preachers since the late 1800s. It's said that Spurgeon would spend most of his week in prayer and study of the Word and not even start to write a sermon until Saturday night once he had thoroughly heard from the Lord. One of his famous quotes during a sermon was this. He said, "Oh, my brethren, what we want today in the churches is violence. Not violence against each other, but violence against death and hell, against the hardness of other men's hearts, and against the sleepiness of our own." At first glance, we want to get real focused on the word violence, which I don't think we need to focus that much on, at least not against each other. And listen again to what he says. "Oh, my brethren, what we want today in the churches is violence. Not violence against each other, but violence against death and hell, against the hardness of other men's hearts, and against the sleepiness of our own." That's a really deep quote if you think about it. Spurgeon's words, I think, are kind of a righteous anger and frustration at what the fallen world has produced in the hearts of men, and a warning to all of us to keep our own hearts in check. He, like many of us, have seen and continue to see the collateral damage on lives that are misdirected by the lies of the world. Brokenness is everywhere in humanity, and none of us are immune. The collateral damage is also seen in the sleepiness of the hearts of those who profess Jesus, but rarely or never experience the transforming power in their lives and in their hearts that he promises and that we are to expect. Yes, we are to expect that. Spurgeon was not the first to be frustrated at the hearts of men. In Mark chapter 3, the first few verses recount where Jesus healed a man's withered hand. Listen carefully to the emotion that Jesus has. In chapter 3 it says, "Then Jesus entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched Jesus closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they could accuse him. So he said to the man who had the withered hand, 'Stand up among all these people.' And then he said to them, 'Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or evil, to save a life or destroy it?' But they were very silent. After looking around at them in anger, it says, he was grieved by the hardness of their hearts. And he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored." You will be hard-pressed to find many, if any other place in the Bible where it outright says that Jesus was angry. Now, we know he turned over the tables, and I know you're going to look in your Bibles, but not many translations actually say he was outright angry, although I think he was. What was he angry with in this passage? He was angered and grieved at their stubborn and hard hearts. Those hearts that were so bent on keeping the letter of the law that a man's well-being and his healed hand was not more important than doing good on the Sabbath. So what do you say? Let's be sure and take an honest assessment of our own hearts to make sure they aren't falling asleep on the job, so to speak. Is so easy to do sometimes, isn't it? Let's not grow weary of doing good, of sharing Jesus with others, of inviting those that we meet to come and see, and people call into action because of their faith in Jesus. Let's get a little indignant, maybe a little righteously angered with the evilness in our world, the hardness of men's hearts against the goodness of Jesus and his people. And finally, let's not ever stop taking an honest assessment of our own hearts to make sure that they aren't falling asleep on the job. God bless the rest of your week as you worship him in all that you're about.